Heidi Perryman. Uh, she has a Ph.D., but it's in child psychology. She became what she calls an accidental beaver advocate in 2006 when a beaver family moved into Martinez, where she lives. She started an organization called Worth a Dam, which was dedicated to maintaining beavers in Alhambra Creek in Martinez. And through her work, the city of Martinez became the first in California to utilize flow devices, which she'll talk more about because I don't fully understand what that is, to enable beavers to coexist in an urban environment. And they held their first Beaver Festival in 2008, and they're now celebrating their 15th anniversary. So they joined a team of experts of beavers in California. There was some controversy about that. Some people argue that there have never been beavers, and it appears that there's a lot of historical evidence that that is wrong, and there have been beavers, lots of beavers in lots of places. With Sonoma State, well, she's going to on native plants. A talk that I'm really looking forward. It's yours.
Thank
Do
you
you
so
want to
much.
share your screen?
Yeah. All right, let me go to the technology of sharing my screen and and the other technology of
Play.
finding the I want to hit play. Yes. Okay. Unfortunately, I cannot get the little button that
There you
hits
go.
play because oh, there we go. All right. So I'm really happy to be able to talk with you guys about beavers, about them, and I'm sure you've heard lots in the local news and local buzz. And that wasn't always true, and it certainly wasn't true back when I got involved. I originally felt very inadequate with us, a background totally in child psychology. I felt very unprepared for learning about beavers or helping anyone deal with them. But as it turns out, most of the concerns beavers bring with them are uh, not unrelated to soothing fears, and working with city council was actually not unlike helping unreasonable children. So it turned out to be okay. So, and I am going to walk us backwards in time to think about where beavers were back before we wiped them out. Historically, it is estimated there were between 60 and 400 million beavers in North America. That is a beaver in every river, stream, and rill. Samuel de Champlain said it's basically a beaver per every 1 to 3 miles of stream. And you can imagine how different America looked, how different California looked in those times. It was very boggy and wet, and um, lots of growth and native plants probably roaring off the edges. We decided, uh, all kinds of people decided that beaver fur was great for hats because beavers are an aquatic rodent, so their underfur was waterproof, and we used that underfur for felt for hats. And that really drove basically the economy from the 1300s on. We trapped beaver out of England by the early 16th century. We looked for all the beavers in Germany and Poland, and we pretty much trapped them out of Europe by the end of the 16th century. And this drove the exploration. We were very happy to find beavers uh, in Canada and in the New World. So this is a slightly different species. It's castor fiber and not Castor canadensis. But excuse me, reverse that. Castor canadensis is in Canada, obviously. Castor fiber is in Europe, but they're basically the same. The fur is the same, and for what we wanted them for, they were the same. So actually, the pilgrims that came to the United States paid for their passage on the Mayflower by using beaver pelts. They trapped as many beavers as they could. Beavers were like little $5 bills just swimming around, and anybody who got them could cash in. This little image up in the corner is a $6 bill designed by Benjamin Franklin that showed the stalwart colonies chewing on the tree of uh, imperialism that was a beaver, but it didn't ever get accepted, but that was his idea. So this map was designed by Henry Mull in the early 1600s, and basically it showed how many beavers were all over America heading up into Niagara Falls. This is really what drove a lot of the exploration of Canada and the United States. And in fact, it was so important in Canada that excuse me, I'm going to go backwards, but I can't go backwards. That in Canada, the beaver actually, if you look in the lower left right-hand corner, the beaver pelt was actually used as the first measure of currency for Canada. So one MB stands for one made beaver. That is one beaver that has given up its skin and worn off its outer coat, and it's ready to go make felt. Um, so our explanation of what we expected in the United States and in Canada was really impacted by beaver. Now, the 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 fall of the beaver population sort of went like a giant chorus line wave. So we lost beaver in England, then we lost beaver in Europe, then we ran out of beaver in on the East Coast in America, then we ran out of beaver in the Midwest in America. Then Lewis and Clark kept looking for more beaver on the West Coast in America, and we finally got to California. And because we got to California so late, people were very confused about what the native population of beavers was in California. California actually got trapped by the Russians by boat in the 1700s. And so we ran out of beavers probably long before you and Young came out here looking for beavers. And this really affected the thinking of fish and game. When Joseph Grinnell, the first director of vertebrate zoology, wrote his book on fur-bearing mammals of California, he said that there were some beavers in Sacramento in the Delta area, and there were some beavers in the northern Klamath and Humboldt, but mostly there weren't any beavers in coastal rivers. They weren't in most places of California, and they didn't exist over 1,000 feet in the Sierras. And that, of course, didn't make sense to me or to lots of people because beavers exist to 10,000 feet in the Colorado Rockies, and they exist on both sides of the Grand Canyon, and they exist all the way down to the Sonora River in Mexico. So why couldn't they manage our bumpy hills in California? And we actually decided, oh no, decided to begin to think about this differently. We were happy to run into an archaeologist from the Bureau of Land Management who had done a had done a dig in the eastern Sierras and come across a paleo beaver dam and had the presence of mind to carbon test the wood for that dam. And the oldest parts of that wood tested as continuously rebuilt from 580 AD all the way up until about 1850 when the fur trade wiped them out. And that really gave us the presence of mind and the courage to go back and look at the data. And what we realized is there were lots of people living in California before white people got here. So we looked at tribal records, we looked at native languages, we looked at cave paintings, we looked at all kinds of indication of information. And what we found is that beavers were basically all across California, which should surprise absolutely no one. Honestly, there is no state that has suffered from the same confusion that we state. If you talk to somebody in Nebraska, they just laugh at you that we thought we didn't have beavers. But we did. And it's easy to understand because our historic record was pretty much wiped out by the earthquake. All of our museum specimens were destroyed and the Academy of Sciences, and a lot of our information was lost. So we were able to publish 3 papers in the Journal of Fish and Game in those days, and basically showing that beavers belonged everywhere in California. And that was important because it really determined how people felt about them and how people responded, and slowly has changed minds and definitely has changed the conversation. So, beavers belong here. Beavers are really one of the first natives. One of the reasons that this particularly impacts us and native plants is that the weight of the beaver pond pushes on the bottom of the the pond floor, and that actually pushes water into the aquifer and pushes the water up through through the area, pushing in cooler water into the stream. And what we know is that the groundwater looks very different in an area where the beaver pond is present. Even though you can see the water on top of the surface, it also really changes the water under the surface. So beavers are definitely one of California's original natives, and they make a huge difference in all kinds of ways to the wildlife and to the water storage. And of course, the wildlife that exists on beaver ponds also make a big difference to the pollination of those native plants that are going to be important in the area. Um, Beavers have a very dynamic relationship with willow, which I'm sure you're aware of. Beavers eat trees, as you know. They have front teeth that are continuously growing. And one of the trees that they enjoy the most is willow. Um, and actually, some people have said it is so impactful to willow to have beavers on the landscape because they are creating more ponds, more muddy banks, more shoreline. They're actually making more willow as fast as they consume it. So some people refer to beaver as willow farmers, which is a great way to think about them. Um, Willow is, there are several different kinds, of course, and the kinds that we have out here are also, we see in higher elevations, we see beaver having a very similar relationship to aspen. That as beaver are taking aspen, they're actually creating ponds and muddy shores where more aspen is growing. And that's been a really important understanding for us. Beavers also eat all kinds of things that aren't trees. They eat tules, they eat reeds, they eat native plants, they eat grasses, they eat
They eat grasses.
they eat grasses. I have some nice footage of them eating grasses that I could show you. They eat our beavers in Martinez ate blackberries, blackberry bushes. They eat azolla, that little pond weed, duckweed in the water. Beavers really make a lot of varietal food choices. Our female beaver, whenever she was pregnant, she used to really love to eat fennel, wild fennel. And she would, when we saw her gathering up wild fennel, we'd get very excited because we knew kits were on the way. Someone said to us once that fennel is actually a plant that stimulates lactation. Now, I don't know if beavers know that, but she definitely loved fennel when it was kit time, and we never saw her eat it any other time. So we I've even seen beavers eat horsetail. So they do a lot of differential feeding, and they um, really change the reproduction of the plants because of the habitat for the plants that they create. So beaver chews on a tree, and the tree actually, it's like hard cutting back a plant in your garden. It coppices, it grows back bushy and more dense. And this coppicing actually makes ideal habitat for nesting and songbirds. This nesting and songbird effect is so dynamic that there was recently a study done in Poland that showed that beaver population changed the population of birds some 50 miles away in neighboring forests. And this really is a cascading trickle-down effect that beavers have on the landscape in all kinds of ways. Now, a couple years ago, BBC Earth had a great article where Alex Riley said, the beaver isn't just an animal, it's an ecosystem. And we thought that was such a great quote that I designed this poster to kind of explain the effects of what it means to the wildlife around the area just to have a beaver in the area. And it's also important to think about what happens when that beaver, when that keystone species, when that ecosystem engineer is removed from the habitat, and what it was like in California when we took away all those beavers, and when we allowed those dams not to be rebuilt, all those neighborhoods for wildlife and wetlands to not be preserved. Now, California has outlawed fur trapping. There's no longer a fur trade in California, but there is lots of depredation in California. And depredation basically refers to uh, a landowner being concerned about a beaver doing something on their land, and they get a permit from CDFW to depredate that land. So the beaver's eating your tree or flooding your basement, or you worry that it's going to flood your basement, and they give you a permit to trap it. Now, these depredation numbers are not actually public. They haven't ever been reported, but we've used a FOIA request to get access to them for the last 10 years. And what we can see is that about 3,000 beavers a year in California are given permission to depredate. And California really varies by county how it responds to beavers. And partly it's because the population is really different in different parts of California. Probably in some places it hasn't recovered at all. And also it's different because of how quickly development is occurring in those areas. I will say that I've never run into a depredation permit from Marin, and I've only rarely run into them in Sonoma. So we probably don't have very many beaver incidents out this way. What we were able to do in looking at that is just to learn that one county had 7 times more depredation of beaver than anywhere else in the state, and that was Placer County. And that sort of allowed us to sit down with CDFW and do some this was true even when we controlled for things like water acreage and population density, and really try to do some education out there. One of the reasons that depredation occurs is because of the real challenges that beavers can cause. For landowners, they actually, one of the most common is plugging a culvert. To a beaver, you can imagine that a culvert just looks like a hole in the dam, and they just fix that little hole, and then they get all of this benefit from it. This is a problem, of course, for all kinds of roads and houses. And we really are not happy when beaver culvert issues come up. However, this is one of the areas that we understand the most about how to solve. The invention for solving culverts has been around since the 1990s, and it's very reliable. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. Now, it used to be back when a beaver was causing a problem and you got rid of them, that by trapping, that was a pretty good solution. It lasted for a while. But as the beaver population is recovering from the fur trade, that's not true anymore. Martinez isn't the only town in the world that has beavers. So, what we need to think about is that when you remove beavers from a habitat and it's adequate habitat, you're basically putting up a vacancy sign and you're inviting new beavers to move into the area. Beavers are very territorial, so if you have beavers there, they'll keep other ones away. But if you don't have beavers there, they're going to move in. And that's why using these tools, this trapezoidal culvert not fence, not defense, but fence, but it is a defense, it was invented by Skip Lyle in the 1990s, and he called it a beaver deceiver. Now, people use the term for all kinds of things, but technically it only applies to the trapezoidal culvert fence. And basically, this works by making it harder for the beaver they have to work harder when they're building the dam, and they move farther and farther away from that source of stimulation. And they generally tend to give up and not build the dam across the culvert because of it. These are very effective. They have been shown to reliably prevent building in culverts in many, many cases over a very long time. In fact, in some parts of Vermont, they're installed proactively, as in, as soon as you put a culvert in, you put in one of these. And because when a beaver shows up, it'll stop him. And that is such smart thinking. And I wish we could think about that in general. Now, the other thing that beavers can do that cause people to worry is by elevating the water level such that it floods out or people are afraid it will cause flooding, just like in Martinez, that people's basement gets blocked off by water. So they are worried about the dam height. And the dam height can be controlled with a pond leveler, and pond levelers are also very well understood. They've been around since well, after the Beaver Deceiver, but before 9/11. And they are really well understood, and there's great research that they're very effective as well. This is basically what we had in Martinez, and it completely controlled our issue for a decade. Basically, moves the water from upstream to downstream, and it does it in such a way that the water loss gets disguised from the beavers. That thing that looks like a cage, this is all submerged underwater when it's working. So it's not a cage for the beavers, though. It's a cage for the pipe. Because if it wasn't there, the beavers would plug that pipe. They'd feel the suction. Beavers know how to plug leaks. Does it work? Did it work in Martinez? Well, it certainly did. We actually had 10 years where this controlled our problem, even though I don't think anyone in Martinez ever thought it would. Certainly, there had never been done before, and we were happy to be a pilot project. Whenever people called Fish and Game about these flow devices at the time, they said, oh, those things never work. The only choices you have are to kill the beavers or flood. And increasingly, what we see now is really reliable research looking at these things and realizing that they're actually cost saving as well as effective. When you think about what it costs to rent tobacco for a couple hours or what it costs to hire trappers year after year, what the financial costs are of managing a beaver population in an area. Whereas if you can coexist with these beavers, then they can stay on the habitat and they can keep all those other beavers from moving in. They use their natural territorial behaviors, and you don't have to worry about getting millions more. This is really something we learned in Martinez, that there are lots of reasons why a city or a landowner would want to live with beaver. And all these pictures were taken in our urban creek in Martinez after the beavers were on site. We have new wildlife, we have new fish, we have new species of birds, we have new species of fish eaters. And this is true for the growth of all kinds of things in the creek. Um, and let's talk a little bit about why that happens. If you think about it, a beaver is building a dam with mud and sticks and sometimes rocks. If there are rocks in the habitat, they'll use rocks. Or if there are car engines in the habitat, they'll use car engines too. They are constantly moving and removing mud. They use mud kind of as mortar to hold the whole thing together. They use it as glue and they scrape it off the pond floor and they dump it onto the dam or lodge. And the bottom of the pond floor ends up looking different. It kind of looks pockmarked like the surface of the moon. And we end up with lots of different elevations on a pond floor. And that's important because it turns out that all kinds of macroinvertebrates love to live in these different elevations. So we end up with a bug bloom at a beaver pond, and we end up with richer sediment because it gets trapped in that log or in those logs or twigs, and those get broken down by tiny bugs that we can't see, and they get eaten by bigger bugs that we can see, and of course they all get eaten by dragonflies and mayflies, and of course they become food for all kinds of fish and all kinds of insects eaters, all kinds of birds. The birds come and eat up those things, and they're also seed eaters and all kinds of insect eating birds. And they're making their droppings all around and planting. That's circular growing as well. So we end up with a fish population that is more diverse and also more dense in a beaver pond. And that it was what we saw firsthand in Martinez when the beavers came. All the things that want to eat the fish, they want to come to the beaver pond. It's a great place to try out new behaviors. It's a great place to come and try something you've never done before. If you're a young great blue heron, for example, we got lots of visits from young wildlife at the beaver pond. So again, all these pictures taken in urban streams of beavers and the difference that they can make. We saw our muskrat population bloom in Martinez, and we saw the return of mink. We hadn't seen mink in Alhambra Creek for 35 years, and the mink came in with his mother and siblings, and we were pretty excited to see this come back. What we know from research in the last 20 years out of NOAA is that beaver have a very dynamic effect on the return of salmon. And that really makes a huge difference. And the reason, sometimes people worry, they like, oh, are they going to make it over those salmon? Are the salmon going to make it over those beaver dams? Well, it turns out that these two species co-evolved. They really depend on each other. And juvenile salmonids very much grow up safe and fat inside of the beaver pond. It gives them a cool place, gives them a safe place, gives them lots of insects and fish to eat. And actually, what determines whether you're safe when you go to sea is how big and fat you are before you go. Because more things fit in your mouth and you fit in fewer mouths. And that's pretty much the life of a fish. So we really see a lot of interest in the salmon population with beaver dams. Even if you're not interested in wildlife or salmon or birds or bugs or frogs, you might be interested in the research that's been done to look at beaver dams having a huge effect on nitrogen removal, beavers having a huge effect on resistance to drought, allowing us to have places where there are pockets of areas that are resistant to drought. There was a study in Canada during the most severe drought they had ever had, and it was found that beaver ponds contain 9 times more water than equivalent ponds without beaver. More recently, the research of Dr. Fairfax has shown that beaver ponds are 3 times more resistant to fire than other ponds without beaver. That's a pretty big difference, and it really means something in California and really got a lot of attention. What we also see is that there's research that beaver dams are great at restoring incised streams. And of course, that's what we have a lot of in California. That's what Alhambra Creek is. When beaver dams blow out, they actually create over time the kind of debris that will force the stream to jump its banks and rechannelize and reconnect that floodplain over time. The research of Dr. Fairfax that's showing that beavers in high risk fire situations are providing refuge for wildlife. They're providing refuge for plants to have resilience and grow back. Plants don't have to reach down as far to hit the root table, and these wet plants is one of the reasons beaver ponds are 3 times more resistant to fire. I just wanted to show you this picture, which is taken in Rockland, and it shows and replenish that river. And all the flammable area on the outside is where beavers are not tolerated. And again, this is in Placer County, which is not a great place to be a beaver in general. I want to show you this footage, drone footage taken by Dr. Fairfax of Tahoe after one of our significant fires. You can see that all the trees around the area are completely burned out, and the lush green middle of course, is beaver habitat. And you can imagine if we had more of those lush green spaces on the horizon, on the planet, we actually would do a lot better with the fire situations that we have now. Um, okay, so how do beavers do all this amazing work? And I'm going to talk a little bit about beaver adaptation. Hmm. Because I really want to make it clear that beavers, even though they live in the water most of their life, they're mammals just like us. They have to breathe air. They don't live in the dam. They work in the dam, and they live in a lodge or in a bank hole. So they need to live above the water level. If you look at the line of the beaver, you could see that its nose and its eyes and its ears all stick out of the water while it's just laying there, not really doing anything. It swims entirely with its back feet. Its front feet are grasping like a raccoon kind of, or like ours. And its back feet are webbed like a duck's. So it can swim along with those back feet, powering along, and it can hold its breath for 15 minutes, which is about 4 times longer than an otter. Beavers have really important work to do under the water, not just eating. And these webbed feet are very good at swimming along. A beaver can use its tail like a rudder. It can also use its tail to slap the water for danger, which is great communication tool because you can hear it above the water and under the water as well. And they also use their tail for balance. When they're young, they like to stick their tail up in the air. It's really cute because that helps them not fall over. Beavers, when they're little, bob like corks in the water. They're very floatable. Beavers have naturally protected eyes. They have a third eyelid, so they can have built-in goggles. When they want to go underwater, they can close that third eyelid and never get debris in their eye. They have nostrils that close and ear flaps that close. They even have a second valve behind their mouth. So they can be swimming along, holding a stick underwater, and they have that second valve closed, and it has to be cleanly with oil from their castor gland. So they are doing this grooming at the end of every day and at the beginning. This is not the fur that we wanted for felt. This is the outer fur. It all has to wear off. And the under fur underneath, which is waterproof, that's what we used for hats. So beavers are rodents, but they are rodents with a difference. They can only breed once a year. They stay with their parents for 2 or 3 years. And it takes a long time to learn all the things that a beaver has to do to be a beaver, what things to eat, what things to build, how to take care of a family. You see that when the kits are hanging out with the parents, they are learning all the time. And there is both social learning that goes on, and kits get better through trial and error. Um, we love to be able to watch the development of the family in Martinez firsthand. We had 27 kits born in Martinez over the 10 years the beavers were with us. And you might be thinking, oh my God, 27 kits. What do they do with all those beavers? But it's important to remember that beavers disperse. When they get to be 2 or 3 years old, they have to go off and find their own fortune. They have to leave home and they have to go at least 2 miles away, and they might go as far as 50 or 100 miles away. In fact, we like to think that Martinez changed the populations of beaver all over the Bay Area. We have beavers now in Sonoma and Napa and Fairfield and Walnut Creek, and I am sure that some of them are related to ours. Now, which brings me to the Martinez story, which you may have heard something of. This is way back in 2007. The Beavers showed up in Alhambra Creek, and Martinez is a very old town, as you know. We are on the Carqueta Strait. We have lots of problems with flooding historically, so people were not thrilled about the Beavers moving in. And the city was concerned when they built a dam and a lodge. They were worried that this dam was going to elevate the risk of flooding in an area that was already prone to flooding. And so they got a permit pretty quickly to depredate or kill these beavers. Well, as you can see, this is right in the middle of town. It's Carquinez Strait is down there on the left, and Main Street is in the middle. And the beavers were right below Main Street, right at the edge of where the stream was both tidal and fresh. So everybody could see these beavers, all the children on their way to school, all the lawyers on the way to the courtroom, all the jurors looking for a place to park. People could all see these beavers, and people got really engaged with them. It wasn't uncommon in those days to see families with children coming down to watch the beavers. In fact, you could go to Starbucks, you could buy your morning latte, you could stroll out onto the patio, and you could actually watch them play. You could even hear them. When the kids were born that first June, you could tell that young beavers make kind of a low whining sound, almost like a child crying. And I thought, gosh, do the people that want these beavers dead even know about that sound? And if I don't do something to stop them from being killed, when am I going to hear that sound again? So I thought I'd work on it for a weekend or maybe a week. How long could it possibly take? And I'll let you know when we get there. Anyway, so people got pretty engaged with the beavers. It was a topic of conversation when your brother or sister-in-law came to town. They wanted to go see them. And the city decided they better have a meeting to talk about how they came up with their decision to kill the beavers. And they expected so many people at that meeting because at that time we were in all the local papers. Everybody was talking to the media. We were in all the state papers, and we even were on national news. Um, there was a lot of interest in this story. And so we began to think about having this city hall meeting not in city hall. So it was held in the Performing Arts Theater of the high school. And they invited us an expert from Fish and Game, and he was going to explain why the beaver population was a problem. And sub 200 people came to that meeting. They came from uptown, downtown, and out of town. And they said pretty much with one voice, we do not want you to kill these beavers. Find another way. It was an amazing meeting. I sometimes describe it as a combination of the last 5 minutes of It's a Wonderful Life mixed with Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. It was that good. The Humane Society was there, the Sierra Club was there, the superintendent of schools pledged funds to have students plant trees for the beavers and do a study of the beavers. People think I made that meeting happen. I didn't. That meeting made me happen. It was a really amazing meeting. This was November 7th, 2007. And the city council sitting there, they ended up looking like deers in headlights because they were horrified at what they had seen up here. So they did what city councils often do, which is to appoint a subcommittee to study the issue further. And for some reason, they let me be on that subcommittee. It consisted of two pro-beaver people, two anti-beaver people, two council people, and two creek people. And we had 90 days to look at the pros and cons of living with beaver in an urban stream. And the first thing we did was to talk about the issue of dam height. Now, remember, Martinez is the hometown of John Muir. It's where he lived the last 25 years of his life. And I'm sure that kind of bled into some of the spirits of Martinez. But it's also the town with the first shell refinery. So we're not uncomplicated. We want more than one thing in Martinez, and it was hard work to do this differently. So we hired this gentleman, the inventor of the Beaver Deceiver, Skip Lyle. He came out 3,000 miles away from Vermont, where he lives, and he put in a flow device at our dam to lower the dam height. Now, remember, this is 2007. There's nobody else trained in California to do this work. There's nobody that's ever done this before. This was an unbelievable step of faith. And I'm sure the city council did it only because they figured that after it failed, they would have an easier time of persuading people the beavers had to be killed. But as it happened, it did not fail. He installed this flow device, and this entirely solved our problem. It uh, it it allowed the beavers to stick around, and it allowed us to learn how to solve other parts of their problems. So we learned that you could wrap the trees you want to protect with wire, and you could also paint the trees that you wanted to protect with a latex paint mixed with mason sand, and that produced a gritty texture the beavers didn't like to eat. Um, I also learned that willow is very easy to replant, so we can have kids involved in replanting with willow cuttings. You can even replant willow with fascines, just bundles of sticks you throw in the mud. Willow is a very resilient plant. And what we saw over time was that our beavers, actually, we have a couple specimens of trees that the beavers chewed and they coppiced, trees coppiced, grew back, and the beavers chewed them again. So it was really nice to be able to see that happen up close. So our first mom of beaver was had a little birthmark in her tail. No, probably not a birthmark, probably a scar. And this was very important to us, and it became part of our logo. And it was important because it allowed us to know who was mom, who was dad, who were the kids, and keep track of the family. And that mom actually broke a tooth and sustained a lot of infections through that break. And she actually died in 2010. So she was euthanized at Lindsay Wildlife Museum. And after that, we wondered what would happen. She left three little kids that dad took care of. And after dad took care of them, he actually took off for a while and came back with a new girlfriend. And so we had a new mom. So mom two, we got to watch as well. And she was really fun because it turned out that these moms were really different. So this new mom was very protective and very in your business all the time if you were a kid of hers, whereas the old mom had been more laissez-faire, just do what you want. So the first time that the city decided to install the flow device, they never actually voted to keep the beavers, of course. I'm sure they were just keeping their powder dry for taking care of the problem later on when less people were looking or paying attention. And we thought it would be a good idea to throw a party for the beavers. We figured they'd be harder to kill after we threw a party for them. So we threw the first Beaver Festival in 2008, and we invited all the local wildlife groups whose species were affected by the beavers. And we had live music and children's activities, and it turned out to be so much fun. We have done it every year since. And of course, the festival has grown and grown and grown. We just did our 15th, and it was really fun. And we had people from very far away. They were all the way from Garberville, was the one person I talked to. So that was, oh, a guy drove out from Nevada for it, and a guy came out from Tennessee for it. So it was pretty amazing. What we learned from beaver festivals is that it's a great way to get people involved in urban wildlife. It's a great way to visually explain citizen science and why beavers matter and how communities can become involved in small issues to make a difference. Um, I really wanted to work with Worth a Dam to help other cities to figure out how to transition from seeing beavers as a problem to seeing beavers as a solution. And we really have done that in lots of ways with all kinds of areas. And I don't think it's true anymore that Martinez is the only place with beavers. Of course, this is a beaver lodge in Laurel Creek in Fairfield. Um, there are beavers that turned up recently in Palo Alto. You might have run into that story. We have beavers in Napa. We have beavers in Sonoma, as I said. And during COVID, we couldn't, of course, have a beaver festival. And I'm going to have to, I think I have to close my screen for a second because I didn't press the secret button I'm supposed to press. So, do I, I'm gonna, can I stop sharing for a second? Yes. Um, so, oh man, there's so many people there. I cannot find the secret button I'm supposed to press. How do
It's
I,
the green button, Heidi.
the green button? I can't even see it. It's a green button, I know, but I'm, let me make it, okay. Well,
Did you find it? Otherwise,
no,
I can put it up on my screen.
you could put it up. Oh, put it up on your screen. Oh, but it doesn't, your screen doesn't have the movie.
Oh, it doesn't.
Okay, I'm sorry. Um,
Okay.
so I is there a way I can not see people? I cannot see all the names that are here. Well,
You might change the view to speaker view.
yes, I think I'll try that. Okay. And then, oh, there we go. Now I have well, no, I still don't have the thing. Now I have a big U, but not the thing. All right. Well, uh, oh, here we go. Now I'm back. All right. There we go. Okay. Oh, all right. Can you hear me still?
Yes.
Okay. So I thought, New Mexico had a California Beaver Summit. The state of New Mexico wants to get back to a better beaver policy. And I was very inspired by them. And I thought, why not have one in California? Why couldn't we do one in California during a COVID? Nobody could go outside. We could do a virtual summit. Maybe people would come to the virtual summit. And in fact, what we were able to do is to get 1,000 people registered for our summit and actually work with Sonoma State and to put that on. And some 300 of people of those registers were state employees. So I was really happy with the success of the California Beaver Summit. And this is a little summary of day one of the summit. And we had a lot of great scientists, and I thought I would let them speak to you because they can do it a lot better than I can. Uh-oh, not that though. All right. Here we go.
A very key role for beaver in all of this because of what they do in terms of raising water tables, in terms of their natural intrinsic behavior, they want to recharge this groundwater and bring that water level.
Sorry. Oh, sorry, it's my fault.
A very key role for beaver in all of this because of what they do in terms of raising water tables, in terms of their natural intrinsic behavior, they want to recharge this groundwater and bring that water level up to the surface. You know, these large-scale problems, climate change, loss of water storage, they require large-scale solutions. And you know, if we're really talking about beaver restoration on any serious level, we need to do it at a watershed scale.
I mean, what happens when you trap out, several 100 million beavers? Well, hundreds of millions of beaver dams break down, and you lose those ponds and wetlands. You take nothing else from this short talk. It's that the loss of beavers is a profound environmental disaster for all kinds of creatures.
When the Russians came down, stripping the coast of sea otter, the Boston sailors and traders came shortly thereafter, and they put to shore and offered the indigenous peoples trinkets in exchange for pelts of all kinds, beavers, wolves. I believe the California coast was stripped of beaver first, before Jedediah Smith comes. Jedediah Smith comes in 1828. I believe it's because the coast was stripped, and this is true, I think, for much of our early historical fauna in California.
And it turns out that after a while, some of those willow clippings actually take root on that point bar and work to extend that point bar, which means that beaver create more meandering in streams. And the more a stream meanders, the more it's going to tend to jump in banks at that high flow and flood that riparian area and flood that floodplain and charge that aquifer. And so we get willow going there. State farm willow. Why does this matter especially? Well, studies show that if you have enough willow, it can actually slow down floods.
One of the reasons is that as a tribal community, beaver, to even name them, caused so much controversy that it was debilitating at some levels, and I would equate it also to the erasure of us. We do in fact have a word for beaver, and it's hichichi in our language, and isn't part of our creation stories. And so we know that beaver has always been here since before we were, and we hope that they will continue to be here.
Beaver meadows create that sort of balance between resistance and resilience. They are hit by big storms, they resist small ones, and then once those storms pass, they...
Oh, shit. Sorry. Oh, God.
A very key role for beaver in all of this.
Very bad. Okay. I really wanted to play the end for you, but I wanted it to be bigger, and I didn't discover how to do it until the very end. But I don't think I can do that. So I'm just going to say that our meeting was very persuasive in lots of ways. And it was so persuasive that the following year, California introduced a new proposal for a beaver restoration program and a budget item for CDFW. And this was a big surprise because it really required that CDFW both reintroduce beaver in certain areas, but also that they re-educate and help coexist in more spaces. And that was a huge surprise and a huge benefit that has been fairly slow to start, but last year, 2 years ago, they did their first reintroduction into tribal lands in the Maidu territory. And just last winter, they did their second reintroduction to the Thule habitat in near Fresno. And what we are seeing is that they have also issued a grant program for educating cities to coexist with beaver and for them to learn the things that they need to do to allow beavers to exist on the landscape. It was a huge development that we really never expected. One of the unexpected outcomes of this also was that Google got interested in the whole beaver story, and they started to think about their satellites and whether their satellites could pick up beaver habitat. So actually what they did was they were working with Emily Fairfax to create AI that can identify beaver populations all over using Google satellite imagery. And the first test of this tool, because nobody is counting beaver population anywhere, including California, and has never counted beaver population as long as I can think. And so the first tool, we're the first state that gets to use it because Google is based here, so they're going to do our first beaver count later this year. And I'm pretty excited about that because we need to know where they are and where they are not, and where we need to have them back on the landscape. Now, I think there are lots of reasons to coexist with beaver, but one of the best reasons I can think of is that it really teaches us a lot about our use of creeks and our use of coexistence, and really teaches us some tools for citizen science. And I'm gonna, this picture was taken in the Martinez habitat, and I don't know if you can see on the left in the creek is a beaver. And these are the voices of children that were recorded at one of our beaver festivals. So it's combining two of my very favorite things. I thought I would just play it for you.
They build their dams and help reduce flooding. They build dams and that helps reduce fires. They help by providing lots of home for animals.
Well, they build dams by cutting down trees, and I think that helps preserve the water.
They help make wetlands.
They save salmon. They help frogs. They make the water higher. They reduce fires and help frogs. They build dams. They help otters. They reduce droughts.
They help control the water level.
Beavers cut down trees to make less fires. They help frogs. Beavers help by making water making more water by building a dam. They help water below and above the land.
So you can see that our kids have gotten a lot of ideas about beavers, and I'm very happy about spreading that message along because I think they're great. They're great spokespeople, much better than me. So I'm very happy that Wortham has been able to play a small independent role in this beaver story. And I'm very excited to see where the beaver story is going to go next. We're definitely not at the end. We're definitely at the end of the beginning, and we're in a very new place than we used to be. I'm happy to answer any questions and talk about anything else you guys want to know.
Thank you, Heidi. Why don't you stop sharing so we can see more of the audience? And also, I wanted to thank you. It was not only a very interesting from an ecological point of view, but also it was kind of modeled some ways to do environmental advocacy. very successful environmental advocacy in a remarkably short period of time. So it's just amazing what you did and the impact you had from, the experiment of one town and its impact on the whole state. So there's some lessons there that we can take back and think about. We have a few questions in the chat. Yvonne McHugh says, you did mention beaver's adaptation for a diver's weight belt to counteract floating to the surface.
Say that again.
But she's saying that there's some what she calls a weight belt to counteract floating to the surface to keep them underwater.
Yeah, well, they definitely don't have a weight belt, but they definitely learn a lot about controlling their air. And that is one of the most exciting things about watching beavers grow up. Is because very young beavers, of course, can't control their air at all, and they just can't dive because they just float like little balloons in the water, like peanuts. They look like peanuts, and but you see that the other yearlings and their parents, they're constantly diving with them and taking them underwater, turning them and practicing upside down in the water. So beavers over time learn a lot about controlling their breath. And that's actually a very interesting point because one of the ways I can identify a kit, for example, is because it's above water, because it can't put its body in the water. And a yearling, its butt tends to ride up fairly high in the water, but an adult can actually submerge its whole body. And it just will put its eyes and its nose out of the water.
Yvonne has another question asked about reintroductions, whether it's done with the male and female.
Of course, yeah. The two reintroductions that have been done are done with 7 beavers. We're both done with 7 beavers. So a mom, a dad, a couple of yearlings, and 3 kids.
And Jim Normandy asks, what are the prospects for beaver reintroduction in Marin County?
Well, I mean, obviously, I think you'll be the first. Yeah, of all the cities that ask for beavers, you'll be the first because you have a lot of skills at getting things. But I don't think anybody's rushing hand over fist to restore beavers immediately, even especially in urban areas, and especially in, I think that the California Department of Fish and Wildlife is very cautious about its reintroduction, and they have been slower than I wish, but 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 faster than they wish, I'm sure.
Well, it's a lot. There's a lot of interest in Marin County. There's a group of people who are really working on it
Yeah.
now, but there are people who are working on it.
I know, and I did a talk just like 2 months ago to the Creek people in Marin about that really wanted beavers, and they wanted to be able to think about this. So yes, I agree with you.
Sarah Wang asks, any recommendations on how to keep up the progress and helping with the movement?
Well, I think the best thing you can do is to get people involved. And the best way to get people involved is to get them to to the uh, pay attention to the creek now. I mean, why not invite people to photograph the creek and document what trees they imagine are going to be the first ones to get nibbled by a beaver? I mean, why not have a contest to whoever predicts the first tree and is right gets a free dinner at someplace fancy. I mean, I just think it's really good to be able to involve the community in these things in all kinds of ways that seem silly at first, but they're actually not silly because involving people really means getting them to take some sense of ownership. And people aren't all going to behave like scientists and documentary specialists.
Clint Kellner asks, is there a way that salmonids can get past the trapezoidal fences that prevent beaver dams from being constructed in culverts?
That's a great question. The fencing on a beaver deceiver is generally a 6 inch wide, and it could also be mesh 6 inch wide. It could also be if that's not big enough for the salmon passage that occurs, they could also choose larger. I mean, I do sometimes see young beavers go through in that case, but generally young beavers aren't great at building dams, so it's probably not a problem.
Yvonne has another comment about the kind of beavers becoming almost tame. She talks about visiting a lodge in Canada and going out to a pond, and somebody rapped on a tree and the beaver came over to get a willow branch.
Well, I mean that's a great habitat, and you have to imagine that there are scary things that we do that, from a beaver's point of view, that would communicate they need to stay away. And certainly the beavers in Martinez were habituated to a certain extent. They were used to families watching them. They were used to the voices of children. They were used to all kinds of things like that. What they weren't used to is someone being on the bank or moving very near them. That would totally freak them out. So generally, beavers have kind of a hierarchy of danger that they're looking out for.
And Clint, as another question is about if beavers were reintroduced in Lagunitas Creek, where we have a salmon run, hopefully. Do you have any idea how that would affect the riparian forest along its edges? Is it a relatively narrow corridor with large alders? Oh, it is a relatively narrow corridor with large alders. The concern is that there may be a significant loss of riparian trees.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think obviously that is a concern people have, but it's also a, an effect that if you're going to end up with more of the muddy habitat where that alder likes to grow, you can also, if you make a decision that you want to reintroduce a beaver population, you can actually be planting the things that beaver will want. That's one of the ways to encourage them to stick around when you put them in an area. So,
Okay.
Adding some willow onto the landscape might be a great idea.
Okay. Jeffrey, you can unmute to ask your question.
Hi, yeah, actually a comment and a couple of questions. So the comment is many years ago, back in New York State, or actually just across the border into Pennsylvania, a friend and I discovered a frozen over beaver pond that we walked out on to a lodge.
Wow.
Heard the little beavers, I think there probably were kits, kind of murmuring and whining in there. And that was a really great experience. The two questions I have, one of them is you didn't mention anything about the tourist benefits to places like Martinez, which I imagine there must be some to have people coming to look at the beavers. And the other thing was, I got this button not too long ago in Healdsburg, and I wonder if you could say anything about that organization that's doing those buttons.
In Healdsburg? That's
Yeah.
very cool.
Yeah.
I don't know the organization, the Beaver Believer. It's not a group that I know of, but I know that term is actually used by lots of groups. So it could be anyone. But I definitely think when the beavers were active in Martinez, we definitely saw an impact on tourism because people wanted to come to be able to watch. We were on, California watchable wildlife. People wanted to be able to come and watch these beavers. At the moment, we don't have any beavers you can come in and look at, but I still think it's a great opportunity to use something that the city was not happy about, to realize it really was a very fortunate event. In fact, what I will say is that this year at our Beaver Festival was the first time in 17 years that the mayor attended and the mayor spoke on stage at the Beaver Festival about how great the beavers were. And it only took 17 years. So imagine what Marin could accomplish.
My partner also wanted to know why there are none now people can watch.
Well, beavers, I don't know. I don't know why. We had a mortality event in 2015. So the beavers, we had some of the kids died, and the parents moved upstream, and then the parents decided they didn't like it upstream, and they decided they left. And I don't know why. They don't write, they don't call. But I do think it was a significant, it was 4 years of significant drought and I bet that our water was getting more and more saline and less fresh. So I don't know if that had something to do with it, or if that affected the plant life that had something to do with it, their little, you know, their diet. So I don't know. But there are also a lot of places where beaver exists now that there didn't used to be. And that might be it too. They have choices now. We were the only choice in town.
Julie Bongers asks about beavers and fire, and about whether and how beavers relate to the burned but still standing trees following a forest fire.
I'm sorry. How do they relate to still standing?
I guess the question is, do they eat them? Will they chop them down? Will they use them?
Oh, well, of course they would. If there's anything good about them, they will reclaim it. But one of the things that we really see after a fire, of course, is we see tons of bad runoff. We see all kinds of silt and fire retardant running through the streams. And beaver dams are really good at cleaning that water. And that really is another benefit, that not only do you give a place for the wildlife to hide out and the plants to regrow, you also actually reduce some of the toxic runoff after a fire.
Eva Buxton wants to know whether willows can become invasive where beavers have stayed around a while.
Well, willows can become invasive. Well, I'm sure that any beaver worth his salt will do his job and help you with any invasive willow problem you find yourself with. I beavers again will they'll do what they can to keep the willow population in check.
Okay, I think if anybody else has questions, feel free to raise your hand and you can then unmute. Otherwise, I think we're right close to 9 o'clock, and it's been a good discussion. I really want to thank you, Julie or Heidi. I've learned a lot, and we may see some action in Marin County. So thanks so much for bringing the message of what happened in Martinez to us.
Yeah, well, let me tell you that I know people think in general that beavers have never been in Marin County, but I could tell you two incidents that I'm aware of. One is that I canoed up the creek, Olima Creek, and was told by a farmer on the bank that I was really lucky because the day before there had been a beaver dam and I wouldn't have been able to get over it. And that was at the end of the 90s. And the other incident is that I did a talk at um, Richmond Audubon, and they said that there had been a very well-attended beaver in down the street that lots of people knew about in Marin. And so that was interesting too. And so even if you never get them relocated, you might end up with them. They might come anyway. So you may as well learn what you need to know and figure it out.
Well, it turns out we've got 3 minutes, and Yvonne has an additional question about where did the beavers used in reintroductions come from in California?
I think they came from Elder. Oh, the first ones came from Sutter, and the second ones I think came from El Dorado County.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you again. And as for the August public meeting, we're still working on that. That will be Monday, I believe it's August 12th. So there'll be an email on that, and it'll also be on our website. So we look forward to seeing you then. And again, I put the information about the August 24th 50th anniversary dinner in the chat, and hope to see you there, and hope to see you next meeting in August. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.